I'm Rena Uppendahl Mies, and I've lived in Cheney all my life except for a couple of years in college and about 10 months when I got married in 1969. So Cheney is definitely my home and always will be. My first memories of Cheney are playing in our driveway. We lived at Third and Fillmore Street. And I can remember playing in the driveway, and there was a vacant lot next door to us. And the neighbor kids, which were the Meyer kids, the Meyer girls, lived across the street. The Hensons lived right behind our house, and we would play softball in that field all summer long. And our parents would say, get outside, you can come in for lunch, and then go back outside. And if we said, well, we want to be in the house, my mom would always say, well, fine, I can find plenty for you to do. So it was easier to be outside. As we grew older, we would play cards with Linda Meyer and her sister Karen and my sister Theo and I. And we had to drag the card table outside with chairs, and we would play under a tree and play cards because we had to be outside. And we would play even after dark. We would usually go in and eat supper, as we called it, and then go back outside and play in the dark, and we'd play hide and seek and things like that. So I have very fond memories of the neighborhood kids and playing up until you got too old to do things like that, I guess. I recall my dad was in the Army, and I wasn't born until after World War II was over, but that was a very important part of his life. And then he became a partner in what was called Farm Supply on Cheney Main Street. And he was in there until my brother actually took it over when my dad was around 70 years old. And my brother Bruce ran it for several years, and then he also sold it. So I remember being on Main Street a lot, visiting my dad after school. Sometimes we'd walk down there. And I remember we had two grocery stores in Cheney at the time. We had the IGA, and we had another store, and I don't recall what the name of it was, but we would shop at both. Um, and I have very good memories of Cheney Main Street. After we got married, I worked at the REC, which was on Main Street, Rural Electric Cooperative. And I worked there for a few years and was walking down to get the mail one day, and Marion Heath owned the variety store. And I just walked by and I said, do you ever think you might want to sell this, Mr. Heath? He said, well, as a matter of fact, I want to sell it right now. And I said, well, let me see what I can do. So I bought the variety store in 1972 and ran it until 1991. So I was on Main Street there. And after I sold it, I tried to work in Wichita for about 6 months, and I hated to drive in and out. And so I went to work for Keith McMahon, who had a used car dealership, and worked for him for a few years. And then Dr. Steve Tweetmeyer opened a dental office, and he called and said, would you like to go to work for me in Cheney, also on Cheney Main Street? And I said, yes, I'll be happy to be a receptionist. I'll take care of your bookkeeping, but I will not set foot in an operatory. That's not me. He said, deal. And so I worked for him for 23 years until I retired. So most of my life, except for a few items here and there, I spent on Cheney Main Street. And it's very important to me still. I think we're very lucky as a small community to have the offerings that we do as far as retail and services. And we have pharmacy and a doctor's office, and we still have a dentist. A young dentist bought Dr. Steve when he retired. So that's been very important to me as being part of Cheney. I would say that's the thing I think of first when I think of Cheney, Kansas. We went to church. My mother was a Methodist. My dad was a Lutheran. And growing up, we went to church one Sunday at the Methodist church and the next Sunday at the Lutheran church. And we would switch back and forth most Sundays. But my siblings, Theo, Bruce, and I, were all confirmed in the Lutheran church and were members of the Lutheran church for many years. Cheney is also amazing because we have very many active churches, which I think is unusual for a town our size, and it's been very helpful. And the community is very responsive to people in need or other needs in the community. My husband and I got very involved in the Sedgwick County Fair. We helped run the fair for 25 years and retired and let some younger people take over, and they've done a very good job as well. And I remember going to the fair as a young kid, and my dad was also on the board at that time. And we never ate out, we never went to movies, we never did anything like that. But when it came fair time, he would let us have money to ride all the rides that we wanted to ride. So that was a highlight of our summer. I'm sure it was a lot of kids that lived here in Cheney too. And today the Sedgwick County Fair is still going on and is very successful. So Cheney's done a good job with that. In school, I think several of us remember Mrs. Brannon, who was our kindergarten teacher. And I remember taking a nap during kindergarten. I kind of remember doing that. And I never very often went to sleep, but some of the kids did. But I do remember the dances that we had in the 7th and 8th grade. And we would go back during the day to the grade school auditorium, and we would have dances there. And I can remember, I believe it was Dick Hoffine who introduced us all to the twist at that time, in 7th or 8th grade. And that was quite the deal, the twist. And we all learned how to do that. In high school, I remember climbing stairs up to the 3rd floor sometimes to take some classes. And Mr. Dunn was our English teacher. Mr. Diskin was our history teacher, and Mr. Bohm was our math teacher. And Mrs. Rowan was the teacher who taught us how to type. And she was very demanding, but I did learn how to type pretty well. So she was good at that. And then her sister, Mrs. Simpson, was our science teacher. And Zula Harding was a librarian. I remember that Gary Denton, a classmate, and I had a study hall at the same time. And we were the only 2 people in the study hall at that time. And he and I would just visit and visit about things. And he's still a very dear friend of mine today. That was a great experience because I really got to know him, and I appreciate that. I do remember kind of a funny incident in high school that we were invited over to Penny Ogden's house. And it was Jeannie Ferguson and myself. And we were staying up late and just visiting. And Jeannie said, "I can make myself cry." And we kind of said, "Oh, no, you can't." "I can't do that," Penny said. And I said, "I can't do that." And lo and behold, Jeannie just made herself cry, and she sobbed and sobbed. And I'll never forget that. And then she just turned it off and smiled and was her usual Jeannie self. In high school, women did not have sports, but we had a large pep club. And we all had a royal blue dress that we wore to all of the games, and we would march in, not say a word, and sit in rows, and then the cheerleaders would lead us in the cheers. And I do remember how scared we would be if we talked or talked out of tune, because you had to be very quiet and only talk when it was a cheer.